Good morning, a good Devach. Hashem, we had a wonderful Shabbos in Eretz Yisrael. We celebrated my son's engagement. But Hashem, today, my family and I are hopefully going to Hebron to visit with the Amos HaKadoshim. Mirz Hashem, that'll be a schus for, I'll have everyone in mind, it'll be a schus for all of us, all of God's Klal Yisrael. Okay, today we're learning Perek Ches of Pesachim. Pesachim has 10 prakim, Ches test, and we're doing Ches today, test tomorrow, and Yud on Tuesday, and then we start Shkolim on Wednesday. And when we finish Pesachim on Tuesday, that is officially the halfway point through Seder Moed, and to the big step forward. Okay. Today's shir is Lili Nishma Sarah Nachman Simcha Kohen Mishul Mordechai B'Shep Bracha Sabbath Shmuel Leib B'Yam Moshe Ben Yosef Miriam that Hashem will have an aliyah. And first name Ada Sarah Bas Leir Chana Pesach Bas Yenta Yisrael Ben Rachel Leah Rachel Bas Pesach Zoda Avram Yitzchak Ben Rishon Chaya Bas Dovet Bela first name Aso Shar Chali Yisrael. Okay, Perek Ches. We start off the first few Mishnayos. We're continuing with the Korban Pesach, and we know from the previous program that in order to get a Korban Pesach, a person has to be registered to a Korban Pesach. You cannot eat from two Pesachim. You have to be registered for the Pesach, and only eat from one of them. So we're going to talk about that in the first few missions over here. So now the case is where a woman's father and husband both register her on their korbanos, and she did not state in advance which one she wanted to join. So she just got married, and she could eat from her father's, she could eat from her husband's. So Haisha versus Perek Mishnah Aleph, Haisha Bisman, she bebeis Ba'ala. When a woman is in her husband's house, meaning that she's married. Shachar Aleh Ba'ala, and her husband registered and slaughtered his Korban Pesach on her behalf. Shachar Aleh Aviha, and her father also registered her and slaughtered his Korban on her behalf, because that's what he's been doing for all these years. Talcha Mishal Ba'ala, then she should eat from her husband's Korban, because we can assume that a married woman prefers to be registered on her husband's Korban over her father's. That's the typical in a healthy marriage. She wants to be with her husband than to be with her father. If she went to spend the first Yantiv after she got married by her father's house, and her father and her husband both registered and slaughtered the Korban Pesach on her behalf. Tachal b'makom she wrote said she may eat in whichever place, from whichever Korban she said that she wanted to register on before it was slaughtered. However, if she does not say anything at the time, she may not eat from either Korban. Because in this case, it cannot be assumed which Korban she preferred. Therefore, neither registration is kosher since they both lack her consent. So if they're going to her father's house for Pesach, and she made it clear that she wanted to eat from her father's Pesach, then fine. Or if she made it clear that she wanted to eat from her husband's Pesach, then fine. But if she didn't say anything, then tough luck on her. The last thing you need is for like a little major argument to occur the night of Pesach Seder with all the family around and have a whole flare up. So she didn't specify which one she would be part of, then she can't eat from either one of them. Okay. The next case, Yastam Shishach to Olav Apotrofsin. In the case of an orphan who has two guardians, and each of the guardians registered the orphan on his Korban Pesach and slaughtered on his behalf, then the orphan can eat whichever place from whichever Korban he wants, even if he did not specify which one beforehand. Right, because the orphan is underage, and the Torah authorizes the guardian to register the orphans under his care without their consent. So therefore, either of the guardianships, either of the Korban Pesachs from each of the guardians can be valid depending on which one the orphan chooses at that time. Eved shall shnei shutfim, in the case of an Eved Kanani who's owned by two partners, and each of the partners registered the slave on his Korban Pesach, lo yachal mishal shneim. The slave may not eat from the korban of either of them because neither registration is kosher. Since each owner has rights to only half of the slave, each partner cannot register the slave, the half that he does not own, without the consent of the other partner. Therefore, the Eved Kanani cannot eat from either one of them. Another case, a person who is half an Eved Kanani and half a free man, whose owner registered him on his Korban Pesach, lo yachol b'shel rabo. He may not eat from his owner's offering because we assume the owner intended to register only the half of him that was free. Only half that is a slave, this is a achrayus, not the half that is free. Therefore, the slave is not fully registered on the korban, and therefore may not eat from it. Mishnah Beis, ha'omer la'abdo say shchot alayas pesach. If someone said to his eved, to his servant, go out and shech the Korban Pesach for me, they did not specify if you wanted a kid or a lamb. It could either be a young goat or a young sheep that's less than a year old. So the lach is shachak yacha. If the average shechted a kid, then the master may eat from it. Shachak yacha. If the servant slaughtered a lamb, then the master may eat from that too. Because we assume that the master left it up to the servant to decide which type of animal to use. Shachak li'utle. If the servant slaughtered both a kid and a lamb, he slaughtered two animals. He was indecisive, so he slaughtered both. Yacham and Harishon, then the master eats from the one that was slaughtered first, because we assume that the master does not care if his offering is a kid or a lamb, a goat or a sheep. Therefore, the first one that was shechted was kosher, and the second one is puzzle, because he already fulfilled his obligation with the first one. Shachach ma amalarabo. If the master did specify which animal he wanted, but the servant forgot what his master told him, what should the servant do? Yishchat le ugdi v'yoma. Then he should buy both animals and slaughter both a lamb and a kid and say the following before they are both slaughtered. He should make a tanai. In Gedi Amali Rabbi, Gedi Shalo Utlesh Shali. If my master told me to bring a kid, then let the kid be a Pesach offering for a Korban Pesach for him, and the lamb is a Korban Pesach for me. And if the master told me to bring a lamb, then let the lamb be a Korban Pesach for him, and the kid a Pesach, and a Korban Pesach for me. Then he goes back to the master and finds out which one he specified, and then the master eats from that animal, and the servant gets to eat the other one. Finished. Shachach Rabbo Marmalo. Now, if his master also forgot what he told the servant, both animals are already slaughtered. Shneim Yitzie to the basic sreifa, then both animals must go out to the place of burning, where that's a place outside the Azara where disqualified korbanos are burnt. This is because we don't know which of the animals belongs to the master, which belongs to the servant, and he may not eat from a korban which he is not registered. But they are pater from making the the Pesach Sheni Korban, the Korban Pesach Sheni, because they have fulfilled their obligation, their chiyuv with these korbanos, even though they did not eat them. The Ma'aser, they brought a Korban Pesach, they were making a Korban Pesach, and they're just not allowed to eat it. So they don't have to, they're not penalized for having to do Pesach Sheni. And they're saying not chayav kares. Mishnah Gimel. Homer the Vanav. If one who's going to Shalim to bring his Korban Pesach says to his son, he'll be arriving in Shalim after the Korban is slaughtered, but in time for it to eat it. The guy's running late. Hareini Shocheres Pesach Al Mishiyale Mikem Rishon Yerushalayim. I slaughtered the Korban Pesach for the first one of you to go up to Yerushalayim. Then the halacha is as follows: Keva Shechtis Harishon Rosh Arubel. As soon as the first son put his head and most of his body into the city, Zacha Bechalko, Zaka is Achiv, he acquires his portion in the Korban Pesach and acquires portions for his brother along with him, for his brothers along with him. Because when the father said that they will shecht for the son that comes first, he did not mean to register only him. Rather, he meant that the son would be the head of the group. The Olam Nidnin Aleph. Any amount of people can register on a Korban Pesach. As long as there is at least a kazayas amount of meat in the animal for each and every one of them. That because it's a chiyuv to eat a kazayas to be yotzi the mitzvah of the Korban Pesach. So you need to figure out how many kazayas around the animal, and then you can plan accordingly. Nivnin moshkin is a din mimenu ad she yishachit. People can register on a Korban Pesach and withdraw from it until it is shechted. You cancel reservation. Once it's shechted, then you can't. If Shimon disagrees and he says, "Ad shishak one may withdraw from a Korban Pesach after it is shechted until the Kohen throws the blood on the mizbeach on his behalf. Once that's done, then you cannot withdraw your rotation from the Korban Pesach. Mishnah Daled. So when the understanding is that when a group of people register to eat from one Korban Pesach, that it's understood that they're going to eat together as well. But if one person decides that he wants to eat alone, then they cannot force the others to leave and eat somewhere. Then they can't force anyone to sit there. Hamemuna imo acher mechal, a person who is a member of a group registered on a Korban Pesach. He registers other people with him to share in his chilek without asking permission of the other members. And the other members of the group may insist on the following arrangement. They give him his portion, and he eats from his portion together with his guests in one place, and they eat from their portions in a different place. I mean, the original members have the right to say that they do not want to eat their Pesach, the Korban Pesach, together with strangers who are not part of the original group. They have the right to do that. Mishnah Hey. Zav Shirash Deiriyas. Okay, so so we know that's something that you cannot. You have to be tahor to make a Korban Pesach. Like any Korbanos, really. If a person who's tamei at Pesach and will continue to be tamei that night cannot be part of the Korban Pesach, since he will not be able to eat from the Korban that night. Obviously, it's full yom, which is still like in the quasi mode that day, but then he has Herish which becomes tahor. We're not talking about him. We're talking about someone who's tamei through and through, and he's been tamei by day, he's tamei by night. Right. So let's see. Zav Shirash Diriya is a Zav who experienced two emissions, immerses himself on the seventh day of his tumah, becomes tahor at nightfall. He's a Tuliyot. Shoftin Allah B'Shvi. Therefore, we can shech the Korban Pesach for him on on the seventh day of his tumah, if it falls on Erev Pesach, since he will be able to eat from the korban that night. Rosh Shalosh, if he experienced three emissions on the same day or on three consecutive days, so that in addition to being tovel on the seventh day, he must also bring korbanos on the eighth day before he may eat the before he may eat from the korbanos. Shochtin Allah b'shmini shlo. There we may shech the Korban Pesach on his behalf on Erev Pesach if it is his eighth day of Tamah. Not on the seventh. Shemer is Yom Keneged Yom, a woman who observes a day for one day for a day. Yeah, it means she experienced abnormal blood flow for one day, and thus becomes toher by immersing herself the next day, waiting until nightfall. It's one for one. Shorten aleh b'sheni shalah. Therefore, we may shecht the Korban Pesach or Korban Pesach on her behalf on the second day of the day following her blood flow. Raz Yamim, if she experienced abnormal flows on two consecutive days, in which case she purifies herself by toveling on the third day and waiting until nightfall, until Tisha Chavim. Shaftin Aleh B'Shlishi, then we may shech the Korban Pesach for her on the third day. Zava, and for a Zava who must observe 7 clean days and then bring Karbonis on the eighth day, and who is also to eat Karbonis until then. Shaftin Aleh B'Shmini, we may shech a Korban Pesach on her behalf only on Erev Pesach that falls on the eighth day of her tumah. Mishnah Vav. Ha'onin. What? An onen who's someone whose close relative died that day and was not buried yet. So this is the right to eat any kabbanas that night after his relative's death. I mean, if a kid, there's a pasuk l'chati b'oni mimenu. So that's the first day. The first day of even the night after is the rebana. And if a keach is a gal, as well as someone who is removing a pile of rubble from on top of a trapped person, who, if the person is dead, now the guy became tummy from a corpse. And so too, someone whose jailers, who the prison guards promised to release him from prison by the nightfall of Pesach, he could be part of the Seder. And a sick or an old person who is capable of eating a kazayas and meat despite his weakness. And the law is in all these cases that we shech the Korban Pesach on their behalf, since the issue for an owner to eat the meat of Korbanos is only derbanan. The Rabbanan waived their issue for the sake of allowing him to eat the Korban Pesach. And since the person moving the rubble does not know whether the victim was dead, we assume him to be Toher and allow him to eat the Korban Pesach. And in the case of the prisoner, we assume that the jailers will keep their word and release him in time to eat the Korban Pesach. And in the case of the sick and the elderly, we assume that they will remain well enough to eat a kazayas meat that night. Al kulan ein shoftin aleihen b'fnei asman. For all of these, however, we do not shecht on their behalf as a group by themselves. Shemi view as a pesach l'dipsul, because we are concerned that they might cause the meat of the Korban Pesach to be disqualified by leaving it uneaten. So therefore, they must join a group that includes others In the worst case scenario, someone else will eat the meat and they won't be able to. Therefore, since at the time of the korban, that the korban was shechted and the blood was placed on the mizbeach, these people were expected to be able to eat it. So if a disqualification of the kind that we fear happened to them, and it turns out they couldn't eat the Korban Pesach, the Torah Malasas Pesach Sheni, and they are pertain from making a Pesach Sheni, Chutz, and then if except for the one removing the rubble, who, if the person buried under it turns out to be dead, then it's usher to eat it that night. Shu tamim mitzchilaso. Since we see that he was tummy from the start, therefore he was never eligible to have a Korban Pesach checked for him because he was tummy. Mishnah Zayin, two more to go. Ein shochtin es Pesach al yachid. We may not shech the Korban Pesach for an individual if there's only one person registered in it. Yehuda, this is according to Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi matir, but Rabbi Yossi permits it. Rabbi Yossi continues, even if there's a group of 100 people that include some who cannot eat an hour's volume of meat, any shoftin aleihen, we may not slaughter a Korban Pesach for them. We may not form a group consisting only of women and Evet Kananis, or of slaves and minors, because the Evet Kananis might behave immorally with the women and minors, and that's a big problem. So we don't do that. But they can join other groups. And the last Mishnah for today, Mishnah Ches, Onein Tova v'Ochel as Pischel the Erev. An Onein, someone whose relative died that day, he goes to the mikveh on Erev Pesach and eats his Pesach offering that evening. So since an Onein is not allowed to eat korbanos during the day, we are concerned that he might have lost focus on remaining tahor and absentmindedly come into contact with a source of tumah, and therefore we require him to be tovel at night before eating the Korban Pesach. So someone who hears about his deceased relative, he hears that his relative died sometime before today, and Malakilo at Samos, or someone who is having his parents' bones gathered for reburial, both of whom have the abundant status of an only for one day. Tova v'ochel b'kodshim, he goes to the mikveh and may eat from all korbanos on the following night, since even during that day, his only status is only derabbanan, and the Chachamim did not extend their Isser to the following night to overturn a din d'oraisa. You can't do that. Gershon, this guy Erev Pesach, if someone who converted to Judaism on Erev Pesach, he was circumcised. He was bismillah that day. Beishamai Amin Tova Ochel as Pischal Erev. Beishamai says he is tovel in that day to complete the conversion process, and he may then eat his Korban Pesach that night. The Beis Hillel says someone who separates from the orla is like someone who separates from a grave. Just as the person became tummy from a corpse cannot become Torah unless he's sprinkled with mechatas from the paraduma on the third and seventh days of his tumah, so too a ger must be sprinkled with mechatas on the third and seventh days after his bismillah before he can eat from a Korban Pesach. This is because of the concern that he may have come in contact with a mace shortly before his conversion. Thank you for joining us. We will continue tomorrow with Perek test. Have a wonderful day.